This is TechCrunch. Retail investors are famously locked out of the startup world. Robinhood is attempting to change that by allowing the general public to invest in a portfolio of what it calls some of the most exciting private companies operating today. Now, to do that, the company that pioneered the commission-free brokerage model has secured access to 8 startups, including Databricks, Stripe, Mercor, and Aura, grouping them into a vehicle called Robinhood Ventures Fund 1. The fund, which also includes Ramp, Airwallex, Revolut, and Boom, set out last month with an ambitious $1 billion target, but demand for this novel way of investing in private companies was lower than expected. On Thursday, Robinhood announced that the fund had reached a total fund size of $658.4 million, which could reach $705 million if underwriters exercise their full allotment. The shares, priced at $25 in the offering, began trading on Friday and closed the day at $21, a 16% decline. RVI's reception on Wall Street stands in stark contrast to another attempt to give individual investors exposure to buzzy startups. When Destiny Tech 100, a publicly traded closed-end fund holding stakes in 100 venture-backed companies, including SpaceX, OpenAI, and Discord, direct listed on the New York Stock Exchange in March of 2024, its shares surged from a reference price of $4.84 to an opening trade of $8.25, eventually closing its first day at $9. Destiny Tech 100 has kept climbing since its public debut. The fund closed trading on Friday at $26.61, a 33% premium to its net asset value of $19.97, meaning its shares trade well above the actual value of its underlying holdings. So, what explains why retail investors are not nearly as excited about Robinhood's fund as they were about Destiny Tech 100? Well, the most likely explanation is RVI's lack of exposure to the companies widely expected to go public at enormous valuations: OpenAI, Anthropic, and SpaceX. Robinhood is looking to address that. RVI intends to add more startups to the fund, eventually aiming to hold what Robinhood Ventures president Sarah Pinto described to TechCrunch as 15 to 20 of the best late-stage growth companies out there. The company's CFO, Shiv Verma, told Axios Pro on Friday that Robinhood is eyeing exposure to OpenAI. But securing access to these high-profile companies is far from straightforward. Robinhood is aiming to get directly onto their cap tables through primary capital raises or secondary share sales. And that's difficult, even for a firm with deep roots in Silicon Valley. A cap table, the official record of who owns equity in a company, is closely guarded at most high-profile startups, and winning a spot on one requires either being invited by the company or purchasing shares from existing investors with the company's blessing. Pinto acknowledged it is very difficult to get into any of these companies, and the investment rounds are very expensive. And that's just one of the reasons democratizing private markets is easier said than done, and why the companies most retail investors actually want to own remain, for now, out of reach. Drew Perkins has been inventing computer network tech and building startups since the dawn of the internet age. Now he's back as a co-founder and CEO of AI networking startup Eridu, that's officially coming out of stealth on Tuesday with an oversubscribed $200 million Series A round. Now, the round was led by Chromatic partners, renowned VC Jim Dore, Matter Venture Partners, and others. Now, Eridu has now raised a total of $230 million, according to the company. Perkins began his career back in the 80s, and he helped create the point-to-point protocol that became a key part of TCP/IP, the protocol upon which the Internet actually relies. In 1999, the optical switch company he co-founded, Litera Networks, was sold to Ciena for over $500 million. Next was Infinera, which IPO'd and was later sold to Nokia for $2.3 billion in 2025. He also co-founded Gainspeed, also sold to Nokia, and most recently, the AR startup Mojo Vision. But after OpenAI released ChatGPT, Perkins had an epiphany. In February of 2023, Perkins and OpenAI CEO Sam Altman were speaking at a small conference. Perkins told TechCrunch they got the chatting, and Sam told him that what enabled AI and ChatGPT was just enormous amounts of compute. At which time, he said he meant 4,000 GPUs, but now they're talking about millions of GPUs. And he realized from that conversation that the bottleneck to progress will not just be access to more chips, it will be the methods that the chips use to communicate with one another across these systems. So by late 2023, Perkins had met his co-founder, Omar Hassan, whose roots were in networking chip design for the big industry players like Broadcom and Marvell. In 2024, those two founded Eridu. They began to rethink computer networking from scratch, starting with the silicon, meaning new chips designed for AI that integrate more networking functionality. Eridu will eventually sell complete systems that take the spot in an AI data center that a classic network gear provider like Arista Networks takes in a classic data center. These systems will replace many tiered optical connections with on-chip communications. Today, when more networking is needed, more boxes are added, which increases the number of hops each data bit may have to travel and increases latency, which contributes to that delay between typing in a prompt and getting a reply. Eridu is working on a switch that puts more functions on the chip itself, with Perkins saying, "So now I'm saving a ton of power, I'm saving a ton of cost, and then my network is much more reliable because the optics are the least reliable part of the network. GPU compute and memory bandwidth are improving by roughly 10x per year, while data center switches from Broadcom, Marvell, Cisco are still only improving 2 to 3x every 2 to 3 years." The founders made a few calls to VCs, who Perkins has known over the years, and landed Wen Sei as a key investor. Sei is the founding managing partner of Matter Venture Partners and previously helped lead Kleiner Perkins' China Investing Group. Sei told Dore about Eridu, after which the legendary former Kleiner Perkins investor, who had backed one of Perkins' previous startups, also wanted in, and that set off a VC frenzy. Perkins says, "My phone has been ringing off the hook. It's been a fun time raising money for this venture. We are very oversubscribed." Perkins would not comment on valuation except to say that it is comparable to others raising this much at a Series A round and that he feels it's not too low nor too high. He wants his 100 or so current employees to do well on their stock options. He also declined to comment on whether the startup had achieved unicorn status, valued at over $1 billion. Needless to say, if Eridu can deliver on its promise to create a new kind of AI-friendly networking chip and system, it will be in the middle of the largest data center build-out in history. And unlike a vibe-coded product build by a 20-something college dropout, Eridu's founders have something increasingly rare in Silicon Valley these days: deep experience, and all of that bodes well for the company's future. Other leads in the round include Hudson River Trading and Capricorn Investment Group, with participation from SBVA, MediaTek, Bosch Ventures, TDK Ventures, Eclipse, and VentureTech Alliance, which is an investing vehicle of chip fab giant TSMC, among others. Mod Retro, the vintage gaming startup by Palmer Luckey, is in talks to raise funding at a $1 billion valuation. That is according to the Financial Times. The company launched its first product, a Game Boy-style handheld device called the Chromatic, in 2024. The Verge's Sean Hollister said it might be the best version of the Game Boy ever made, but found it hard to separate from Luckey's reputation as founder of defense tech startup Anduril Industries. Hollister asked, If Lockheed Martin made a Game Boy, would you buy one? Lucky said last year that he'd been trying to build a Game Boy-inspired device, off and on as a hobby for almost 17 years now, and described the Chromatic as the result of hundreds of irrational decisions that made it an uncompromisingly authentic celebration of everything that made the console special. Financial Times reports that Mod Retro is working on other devices, including one designed to replicate the Nintendo 64. Meanwhile, the Trump administration appears to have embraced Lucky's vision for autonomous weapons, with Anduril reportedly in talks to raise a new funding round at a $60 billion valuation. That's it from TechCrunch. For more stories like these, go to TechCrunch.com.